Alright, so this video is going to be more of a feedback video for Valve, since I'm basically just going to be talking about the gyro to joystick camera beta. So let me jump right into it. Okay, before I get into the beta, I first want to talk about the old version of what they're trying to replace. So what this style and the new joystick beta are trying to do is they're basically trying to let us convert joystick movements to feel like regular gyro or mouse movements. And honestly, this style was never really that popular for a number of reasons. The first biggest reason, which you can probably see at your screen right now, it's an absurdly complicated thing to set up correctly. And even then, there's not much guarantee that it'll actually feel good. Now, in this example, I've already set everything up, and I'll explain away all of the problems for each of these settings. The first being that I'm pretty sure the vertical scale is still wrong for this style, and it has always been wrong, which means if you ever tried to use this style in the past, in the old Steam input, you were trying to set up a thing that was fundamentally broken because the vertical scale was always wrong. And so I've corrected that here. The next setting that you need to have basically set up perfectly is the response curve. And in new Steam input, I'm pretty sure this is backwards. So is enhanced small movement precision, which makes all of this extra confusing. And for the custom response curve, it's even more confusing because we don't have the actual correct values, because what this correlates with is a power curve. And this slider lets us choose the exponent for that power curve. But yeah, being honest, I kind of miss when old Steam input would actually show you the curves, which is kind of a massive downgrade in new Steam input on top of the backward sliders. The next setting is enhanced small movement precision, and this has always been a really weird setting. Like, totally honest, I'm not sure exactly what it's doing, because in a way it's not really necessary, because from how much I've used it, the only thing it really seems to do is it acts as a sort of fine-tuned slider for your minimum X and Y outputs for your joystick. But as I'll show you in a bit, it is possible to get the exact perfect values for the minimum joystick outputs. So in a way, this setting is kind of completely pointless. But from my experience, you actually needed to increase this setting to a certain amount for everything to actually work well, which I never fully understood. And in new Steam input, this slider is now backwards from what it used to be. And at around 20 is the correct setting that you want to be at if you have the exact perfect joystick outputs. Now, most games obviously control the camera with the right joystick. There are some very niche games out there that use the left joystick. You have your invert options. Not sure why rotation is here. I think that's a bug. Movement threshold, don't really need that. And now the two most important options, the minimum joystick output. What these two settings are for is that you will adjust these till they're just below the point where your camera will start moving in game. You essentially want these to be on the exact dead zone that a game uses for its joystick. Now you may notice here that I have a different dead zone for the X output and the Y output. And the reason for this is because of the broken vertical scale. Because I'm increasing the vertical scale, this means I have to reduce the vertical output proportionally to however much I'm increasing the vertical sensitivity. And this number comes from the 16:9 aspect ratio that this setting has always been stuck at for some reason. I don't know if this is like exclusively a Steam controller issue or if like this still applies to all controllers, but this has always been broken and it has always been annoying. And it has always made this style tedious to set up. But once you do all the math and you carefully and tediously measure the exact dead zone of your game, finally you combine all of that with your gyro sensitivity or your output scale, and this finally lets you control the in-game camera using a joystick as if it were a mouse. And I get why this style isn't very popular, right? Because why would you bother going through all of this headache, setting up a joystick to mouse thing, when you can just set up a full keyboard and mouse config? And like, the thing is, in my opinion, there do exist a genre of game, a lot of games actually, that are fundamentally designed from the ground up to be played with joystick. So my favorite go-to example, what you're seeing here, is the Mirror's Edge games. It's literally a game that's all about movement. And in a game that's all about movement, you don't really care too much about the camera. Now granted, you're holding forward all the time, most of the time, but regardless, this game is all about movement. So the camera just doesn't matter as much here. And another series of games where this style of camera control I think is especially useful is all of the modern Resident Evil games. Because if you ask any speedrunner of what it's like playing modern Resident Evil on keyboard and mouse, they'll tell you, or they should at least, that keyboard movement in those games is absolute garbage. And that's weird, right? Like, in a game about shooting zombies and stuff, you'd think you want mouse input for shooting the zombies. But if you're speedrunning the game and you're trying to like do all these like fine running around corner stuff, it turns out keyboard and mouse, or keyboard specifically, is pretty garbage at that, because keyboards were never designed for gaming. Heck, they were barely designed for typing, and yet we still use the awkward typewriter layout because, oh, it works, everybody knows it, everybody loves it, let's just give people what they love and not actually innovate on anything. What does that remind me of? And so that's why I kind of have a soft spot for these styles, and why I do want to see a better version of this joystick to mouse thing get implemented. Because this isn't perfect, I won't lie. Here you're seeing my gyro calibrated to 1:1, by the way. And to add to the tedium, that means if I actually want to set up a specific gyro ratio, I would multiply this number by the gyro ratio that I want. So 18 times, I don't know, 4, for example, would be, I'm bad at math, 56. So this should give me just about a 4:1 gyro ratio. And immediately, this is obviously more comfortable. Yeah, what you can see here, hopefully, is that this is decently smooth. It's not perfect, though. Like, it's always gonna have this slight jank to it because it is doing a conversion. But it's good enough that it lets me have a fully X input layout. And being honest, for normies, that is a fantastic thing to have. Because a normie isn't going to understand why their UI is swapping back and forth between keyboard and mouse. You hand a normie a full keyboard and mouse config and they're just going to be confused. It's like, where's all the buttons? What do I press? So the joystick to mouse mode is a really great way to simplify configs and to ease people into understanding gyro and stuff. And so before I get into the new beta mode and the issues I have with it, let me go ahead and show you exactly how I found all these perfect settings. Because I used to do this manually, very tediously, and it would take me a long time. But I have made something that should hopefully help streamline the process. So back to my spreadsheet under my links, I have one last link that takes you to a program I made called Deadzone Detective. Now, this is a really simple program I made that is designed to do basically two things: to help you find the exact dead zone that a game uses for its joystick, and to find the counter curve you need for the exponent setting. Now, to actually use this, you do need to install this driver here for a virtual controller. But once that's done, you can just download the program here. And inside, I've included the driver as well. And once you've installed the driver, all you have to do is run the exe and you're good to go. So let me show you how it works. So first important thing to note, when you're using this, make sure you have Steam Input disabled, because Steam Input will try to remap the virtual controller and that will completely throw off the readings. Next, before you actually start using the program, you're going to want to make sure that you increase your controller sensitivity to the highest setting that it can go. And you're also going to want to disable any boost settings that the game may have. And now here's a quick rundown of how this program works. Using the arrow keys, the joystick will automatically deflect to a specific value. And using a binary search method, we can zero in on the exact dead zone fairly quickly, depending on the game. So I've pressed the right arrow on my keyboard, now I'm going to press the left arrow. That takes me to 25%. Camera stops moving, that means we're too low. So let's go high again. We're still too low. Okay, the camera's moving again. And we just repeat this back and forth pattern until we find the exact dead zone. For some games, you gotta be very patient, especially with this one, because of the camera bob that you can't turn off. So, this is the exact dead zone for this game. And on the top left, you can see the exact value. The joystick value is 13,089, and percentage-wise, that's about 39.9%. And then you just test the same thing for the vertical scale. So if you press delete, not backspace, the delete key, that resets the output, and you do the same thing for the vertical scale, because a lot of games actually do like using different settings for the vertical sensitivity and dead zone. So you have to measure the two separately. And for this game, it's fortunately the exact same number. And if you really need to fine tune on the exact setting, you can use the WASD keys as well to do the same thing. So here, I can go up by increments of 1 using W or S. And so that's how you find the exact dead zone setting. So the next thing we need to find out is what joystick curve the game is using, because we need to counter that curve in order to produce a linear mouse-like output. And this is the solution I came up with. So if you hold Control and J, this switches the program into spin mode. So now if you press P, you'll cycle through different levels of joystick output. So now we're constantly spinning at a rate of 50% at the joystick. And what you're going to do is you're going to pick a point of reference in the game world, and you're going to tap K as your point of reference. So I'm going to use this pole up here coming up and tap. So now I wait for the game to do a full 360, and I'll tap again once it has crossed that pole again. And I've set this up so you can record multiple samples. So you can do this once, twice, you can do it as many times as you want in order to produce a more average, accurate result. And if we do this for different levels and different speeds, the program will then automatically estimate what the game's joystick curve truly is. And tap. So that means the camera is rotating at about 6.4 degrees. So now I'm going to move to the next step. And so with 2 samples already, we can already see an estimated curve. Although I do recommend getting as many samples as you can for accurate readings. And this is usually what I land at, is around 580 degrees per second, which means the exponent that the in-game camera is using for its joystick curve is about 6.36, which is a relaxed curve. And so in order to counter that curve, we would need to use a curve of 0.16 in Steam Input. Now, I did have this calculation here for the values that Steam Input used to use, or at least what I thought they were, but I'm pretty sure this is wrong now because all of the sliders in Steam Input are all over the place now. So I'm pretty sure that number is wrong. But the counter exponent of 0.16 is basically perfect. So now we have all 3 things we need to set up the joystick to mouse modes perfectly. We have the exact dead zone, we have the max turning speed of the game camera, and we have the exact counter curve for the exponent. And that's basically how I set up the old option. Now, before I show you how these settings work with the new style, let me cover the last thing that I tried adding to this tool real quick, because I'm not sure if this is something we actually need, but it's something that I thought might be useful, so I tried adding it, but I added a very simple version of it. So if you hold Control M, this will switch you to mapping mode. So now using the up and down arrow keys, I made this to try and map out what the actual dead zone shape is that the game is using. So I already know that the game's dead zone is about 39.9%. So I'm just gonna run through a quick example real quick. So let's just say 25%. And now you can measure the diagonal dead zone. So just a quick test. I'm not gonna do exact measurements. This is just to show you how it works. So if this were the exact dead zones of this game, then that would mean this game is using a square dead zone. And if the shape that you get here comes out to like a hexagon, then that's probably a round dead zone. So this is just a really simple thing I slapped together because I don't know if it would help to know that, or if there's even any way to counter dead zone shapes, or if it would even actually affect the output. I genuinely don't know. But if the dead zone shape does potentially affect the joystick to mouse camera, then I figure this might be something worth knowing. Okay, so I've already shown you how I use these settings with the old joystick mode. Now let me show you how these settings work with the new joystick mode. Alright, so now that I have the exact perfect settings, let's see how well the new style works. So I've already plugged everything in now. The minimum output is 39.9%. And this is where my first bit of feedback is going to come in. Keeping the slider as a percentage is fine, but I would very much like it if that when we actually click the text box, that we could put in the exact dead zone value. So slider for simple configuration and text for advanced users. Max output is always going to be 100 in pretty much every game. The exact counter curve we need is 0.16. And the max turn rate of the game's camera is 587.5 degrees. And because I have the exact dead zone set up, I went ahead and lowered the minimum turn rate to 0. And to make sure everything is working properly, I've enabled the angle catch-up to give this the best chance of working properly. And to make sure all the measurements are correct, I'm using a sensitivity of 1:1. And as for all the other gyro settings, I have the dead zone and the precision speed to 0. And I am using player space. And now the moment of truth. Yeah, something's not right here. That is completely different from what I have with the old style. And I gotta say, this is very sluggish and unresponsive. And even though I have the exact dead zone, small movements feel like they're being lost. So the first big problem that I've noticed with this is that instead of relying on the game's max turning speed, I've realized that I basically have to use this setting like I would with the old style's gyro output. So I'd basically just lower this until I get the correct calibration in-game for 1:1 calibration. So that's way too high. And finally, that's about right. This is close to actual 1:1 calibration, but man, this feels not great, to be honest. And I guess that's to be expected. This is in beta, of course. And that's why I'm making this video. So I'm not sure if this setting is factoring in the counter curve, which I have to imagine it would, or at the very least it should, but I think that could be a problem there. Another potential problem with the counter curve is actually the dead zone itself. And also, while I'm here, we need 2 sliders here. Like, I don't know how this works exactly, but some games do have separate dead zones for horizontal and vertical output. That's why the old style is the way it is. But anyways, as I was saying, another potential problem with the dead zone in relation to the power curve is that when you change the curve, you're also potentially changing the minimum output that you're sending to the game. And so that's why I have one more thing left in my spreadsheet to show you. So here at Steam Joystick to Mouse Camera is the last thing that I skipped over in my spreadsheet. When you have an exact dead zone value and you have it on a linear output, that is the value that you're sending to the game. A potential problem is that when we actually set up a counter curve, the output that we're sending to the game now changes, or it potentially does. So in order to actually send the correct value to the game, you would need to change the value in the background to this. So from 13,089, we go to 105.8. And I think Steam Input already fixed this, but just in case this might still be a problem, that's why I'm explaining this here now. Although I don't think that this is what's causing the sluggish behavior in the new joystick option, because by using a value of 0.16, that means the output the game should be receiving is 28,292, which means the camera should be shaking all over the screen, but that's not what's happening. Even at a flat linear response, the new style still feels very sluggish. And once again, here's the same settings, but this time with a linear response curve. I'm still losing small inputs. It's still unresponsive. I don't know. Maybe something broke in an update. I could have sworn this style worked better earlier. But yeah, I have no idea what's going on with it. This style needs work. And well, there you have it. I mean, I don't know. It is in beta. And I'm pretty sure it worked better earlier the last time I tried this style, but something must have broken an update somewhere. And even then, this style still needs work. And so I hope anything that I've shared in this video hopefully goes to improving it, because I do think there is value in these styles if they worked well. Also, being honest, it would be nice if we had some tools built into Steam Input to help find all these settings. Because the tool I made is pretty jank. Because the tool I made uses keyboard bindings, it doesn't actually work well in a lot of games. Like, one example I can think of is For Honor. That game has an automatic input detection that locks your input to the last thing that it detected. And so when I actually press the keyboard bindings in that game, the game gets stuck at keyboard input, completely ignoring the virtual joystick. So if Steam Input had something like this natively inside of it, that would make things a whole lot easier. And so yeah, with those tools and with the way to set them up, I think these styles could be really good for single player games. And I'll go ahead and say that again, because I do need to allude to something here at the end. These styles would be good for single player games. And so I do think Valve potentially might see a problem if these styles work a little too well for games that aren't single player games. But I'm pretty sure there is a way to deal with that issue if it does arise, which I know it already has with a certain game. So I know there exists a solution already for the exact problem that I'm alluding to right now. But that is something else to keep in mind. Alright, and with that, I think that's pretty much everything. So I'll call it here. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.